Rewind back to 2005 and Nintendo is leading the world with the Nintendo DS. The Nintendo DS was a revolutionary dual screen handheld gaming system with touchscreen controls. It was literally pure magic at the time. Though with all this insane hype over the Nintendo DS, the world started looking at Pokemon. Now, while touchscreens are considered a normal part of everyday life right now, for its time, the Nintendo DS was straight up revolutionary, and the Nintendo DS is still considered one of Nintendo's greatest commercial accomplishments when it comes to gaming. Though, during this transition period for the Game Boy Advance to the Nintendo DS, there was a big question mark, and it was surrounding Pokemon, and especially what their next move was going to be. Because Pokemon Emerald for the GBA was on the way, though the Nintendo DS was ready to be adopted by the mainstream audience, though Pokemon had nothing on the DS, and what were they going to do? I mean, Nintendo just introduced a whole new way to play games with touchscreen controls, and corporations and fans wanted to know how Pokemon could now capitalize on this hype. Now here was the big question. How could Pokemon utilize the new features of the Nintendo DS and deliver something that's really exceptional? Well, lo and behold, Pokemon launches Pokemon Dash, a competitive Pokemon racing game, which honestly sounds incredible and the idea is amazing. I mean, a Pokemon racing game seems like a pure cash cow and it just seems like a recipe for success. With other franchises succeeding so much with racing style games such as Mario Kart and Crash Team Racing, a Pokemon racer seems like a golden ticket. Though this is where Pokemon Dash failed everyone, from fans to Nintendo and to themselves, and it still remains to be a blemish on Pokemon's gaming history. And also, don't forget, right, this is during a time when Pokemon games were nearly all considered critically acclaimed leaders in their field. Now, I'll get to why Pokemon Dash failed in a second, though it's kind of funny because to see how much times have changed, because when Pokemon Dash failed, it was like pretty big news. I mean, Pokemon games back then just didn't fail, so it's very funny when we look at Pokemon today because the standard we've all accepted is that Pokemon games will likely be lackluster. I mean, even the recent Detective Pikachu game on the Switch, that was met with very bad critical reception, yet everyone just moved on like, oh, what do you expect anyway? But when Pokemon Dash failed, it actually wasn't like that. Though before we get into the details of the game, it's important to look at some of the details of what happened with this, such as the reviews, and also as a marketing professional outside of this YouTube channel, I also want to look at some of the bizarre marketing that Pokemon Dash had to promote the game. So here I'm on the Pokemon Dash's marketing campaign poster. Now, this is from this era where everything was just so bizarre, dude. Like, it was just like a weird time where they were kind of like experimenting so much in how to get kind of new ways and this new gen way of marketing. And like right now, marketing has changed so much from back then, but you can see the promotional poster for Pokemon Dash with a finger with a lace on it, which is kind of strange. And you can see it says, touching is good. I mean, I don't know, has times just changed, or is that just telling me that is a weird kind of marketing poster, right? And you can see, of course, you've got Pokemon Dash, Munchlax, and you've got Pikachu there. And it looks pretty cool. You've got the old school Nintendo DS. You touch, they run fast. You can use your finger to help Pikachu sprint to victory. So they're kind of trying to sell the whole, you can use your finger to play a video game. It's kind of different to, you know, using controls. It's kind of funny with the Nintendo DS because now looking back at this, I don't think anyone looks and says, wow, how fun, I'm going to use my finger to play a video game. That's just so fun. That's so cool. But, you know, they were trying to sell that like as a big thing and a big kind of selling point about the game, which kind of in retrospect doesn't seem that interesting anymore. Because right now, if I want to play a video game, I think most people would agree you would much prefer to have an analog stick, buttons, and just play it like normally. But of course, they were trying to sell that. Though before I get into the actual gameplay of the game, I have to say that the cover art of Pokemon Dash is pretty awesome, dude. Like, you got Trico, Mudkip, Pikachu, Torchic, Munchlax. But what's really interesting about Pokemon Dash back here is back in 2005, Munchlax was like a really, really excitable Pokemon for many people because, you know, Gen 4 games haven't actually released. So the fact that Munchlax was in this game and it was like a bit of a reveal for people was really exciting. And that was a big selling point as well for it. So I have to say, when I look at the cover, I mean, it does look like a fun game, right? But I mean, that's kind of where it ended. It just had like a real cool kind of design for a cover and kind of wasted in terms of the quality of the gameplay. Now, also, I wanted to say, if you have been enjoying the video, these videos do take a lot of time and effort to research and create. My name's Phil and I cover a lot of topics relating to Nintendo and Pokemon gaming history. Definitely feel free to subscribe to the channel so I can continue making this kind of content. Now let's get back into the video. Now in terms of the marketing, alright, sure, Pokemon Dash was in a very weird and eccentric period of trying something new, though where Pokemon Dash truly failed everyone was the gameplay. Now, the frustrating part about this is the packaging and the general look of Pokemon Dash looks great. And I think the cover design is very cool, and seeing the DS front and back, it actually looks really exciting. Though this is where it all crumbled. Firstly, in single player mode, which is what most people would have been playing, you were limited to only controlling Pikachu. Now, this obviously seemed like a missed opportunity to let other Pokemon have their time to shine. Pikachu, obviously being the leader of the Pokemon franchise, has always been somewhat of a Pokemon that you could control, okay? I mean, it was playable in the Smash Bros series, and in Pokemon Yellow, Pikachu could also follow you. So players always knew that if you were able to control a Pokemon, it would be Pikachu. Though this changed because the Mystery Dungeon games actually explored allowing you to control other Pokemon, so the fact that the single player kind of reverted to this whole Pikachu-centric focus was a little bit disappointing. Now, the other reason why Pokemon Dash failed was because of the self-imposed touchscreen capabilities. Now, truthfully, this isn't just a Pokemon Dash issue, but also a little bit of a Nintendo one, because one of the reoccurring issues Nintendo faced during the DS and Wii era was their tendency to force new hardware features into gameplay, and it was often at the expense of the player experience. So as you all know, the Nintendo DS had touchscreen and stylus. Now, the Nintendo Wii had motion controls, and sometimes it felt like they had to force these features to the point of being a little bit obnoxious. I mean, titles like Zelda Phantom Hourglass made you control Link with a stylus, and the same with the Wii game Zelda Skyward Sword, which kind of forced the Wii motion controls onto you without any way to opt out. And honestly, Pokemon Dash also fell to this issue, and the stylus and touchscreen mechanics felt imposed for the sake of saying, hey, look at what you can do with the new Nintendo DS. Pokemon Dash felt a little bit less like a Pokemon game and more like a Nintendo DS touchscreen showcase wrapped in Pikachu packaging. It honestly just felt like the Pokemon brand was used to sell the DS's hardware features. So it's a real shame because the forced controls weren't there to enhance the gameplay, and this of course was a big learning lesson for Pokemon. But in all fairness, I don't think this is really Pokemon's fault that much, because at the end of the day, they were just trying to see where this new technology was headed. Now, you also have to remember, right, that the Nintendo DS was a pretty significant graphical upgrade. It felt like this was matching the Nintendo 64 on handheld, because even Super Mario 64 got a DS version. Though I think the graphics of Pokemon Dash were pretty bland, and when playing it, you can definitely see it needed some extra polish. And like I mentioned, this is highlighted because Pokemon was truly at the top of their game at this point, so seeing the lackluster graphics was really highlighted. I mean, if you want a quick visual timeline of Pokemon games released before Pokemon Dash, you can literally see the quality. In 1999, Pokemon Yellow came out. Then in the early 2000s, you had Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Then we had Pokemon Coliseum on the GameCube and Fire Red and Leaf Green as well on the Game Boy Advance. Now, it's not an overstatement to say that Pokemon was literally at the top of their game. So that's why the Pokemon Dash failure hurt so much. And I think it's actually a really interesting part of Pokemon's history because, like, sometimes you can be at the top of your game and you can just release something that really disappoints people, because I actually remember Pokemon Dash as a kid, and I remember seeing the cover art, and I was so excited. And then when I kind of experienced the game, I was like, wow, what is this? How did they kind of barbecue this so badly? Like, they really burnt it to a crisp. And it's so interesting to see now in retrospect, because it was like they were literally just, it's like Zelda making a real flop of a game right now, because Pokemon were just in such a good position in terms of their gaming quality during this era. Now, also, I just want to say a little bit of a quick update. If you do want to get updates on my next YouTube videos and discuss the new Legends ZA game, feel free to join my channel's official Discord server. You can connect with the Pokemon gaming and trading card community. The invite is in the video's description. So, you know, like, not enjoying Pokemon Dash isn't necessarily an unpopular opinion. I mean, it's pretty universally recognized as one of Pokemon's biggest failures, and I'd probably argue it's their biggest fail in terms of the gaming space. And like I said, what made this so much worse was because Pokemon was untouchable during this era. So to see it have such an epic failure was pretty wild. I mean, even looking at the Metacritic and the reviews and the public perception, it's pretty big. So here I'm on the Pokemon Dash's Metacritic, and like I said, it's a big deal to see this kind of happen during this era, but you can see just there on Metacritic, released on March 14th, 2005, had a generally unfavorable kind of result at 46. And you can see the user score as well was generally unfavorable. I mean, Pokemon Dash just didn't have the kind of public perception of love. When you look at other Pokemon video games, especially during this era, they had very positive reception, and of course Pokemon Dash didn't. And you can see on GameSpot back then, and GameSpot, this is an interesting era because GameSpot actually made decimal points. You can see they rated it 5.2. They don't do that anymore. Now everything's rated like 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. I kind of feel like a little bit of charm's been lost with that. I do like decimal point rating because it makes it a little bit more interesting and it's kind of more memorable when you see it. I mean, a 5.2 rating is very, very bad for Pokemon, and considering when you look at other titles during this era and what GameSpot gave the reviews, it's a pretty big difference. But you can see the good. 25 different tracks which can be played in both single and multiplayer, and of course you can create custom tracks using Pokemon's RPG GBA cartridges, which was of course a bit of innovation there as well. But you can see the bad, which like I spoke about in this video, was the oversimplistic and terribly repetitive gameplay. The in-game radar is lackluster to point of being useless, and mediocre presentation with dull looking visuals and irritating audio, and the challenge is wildly erratic, ranging from way too easy to exceedingly difficult. And I think this is where Pokemon Dash really failed in terms of the graphical kind of capabilities of it, which, okay, we can excuse maybe some poor graphics if the gameplay was good, but when you've got bad graphics with bad gameplay, it really becomes a hot mess. And of course, you can see IGN back here as well, back in 2005, also gave it a 5. So they were quite harsh with their reviews, and probably rightfully so, like I mentioned in this video, because Pokemon Dash had so much opportunity. And like I said, it's kind of wild that Pokemon's never really touched the whole racing kind of game area ever again. And I don't think they've been burned that bad from Pokemon Dash that it's never going to kind of get revisited. But it would be interesting. I mean, when you look at Mario Kart and how successful that is, it's kind of wild that Pokemon hasn't capitalized on that. I mean, maybe Nintendo wants to protect Mario Kart and doesn't want to have a competitor. Maybe if you did introduce a really high quality Pokemon racing game, it would compete with Mario Kart. But at this stage right now, you can see that Pokemon Dash and the whole racing kind of game never got revisited, and it's kind of a really interesting part of the history. And I kind of, whenever I look back at Pokemon Dash, it kind of makes me smile a little bit, and I get kind of like, it's like such a wild time. And I don't know if a lot of people even played the game, because I do know having Munchlax was a big selling point. I remember me specifically seeing Munchlax. That was a big deal because I knew I wouldn't be able to use Munchlax in a game all the way till Pokemon Pearl and Pokemon Diamond came out, whatever it was, a year or two later. So it was a big deal for its time. So here's the thing, even though Pokemon Dash wasn't that loved, it's kind of crazy when you think of how much Pokemon fumbled an opportunity to create a racing game. I guess it gives you far more respect for Mario Kart. Though what's really cool is Pokemon Dash experimented and failed a little bit, though sometimes Pokemon and Nintendo have experimented and it works out in their favor. I mean, when Nintendo created the GameCube, they really experimented with Pokemon Colosseum and took the franchise to a new level. And what's awesome is that the GameCube introduced a way to trade Pokemon from the GameCube to the Game Boy Advance, and you can actually trade a Pokemon all the way from Pokemon Colosseum to the Nintendo Switch 2, and you can actually see me do that right in this video here. Within this video on screen, I go over the long journey of sending a Pokemon from Pokemon Colosseum all the way to the Switch 2. Click the video that's appearing on screen, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you there.